Part of what I do is to travel to places, cover stories and events, give people a voice, come back and try to have some influence on public opinion. My first responsibility is the people I'm photographing, the people whose stories I'm trying to bring back. You know, it's beyond just building a career for myself. It's a responsibility to keep telling these stories, because if people like me don't go there to reveal something at these places, then the chances are their stories will never get told. I'm not a doctor, I'm not a human rights observer or an activist. I'm there purely to record something, to tell a story. I've been called lots of things, from vulture to God knows what, for doing this. There's always a misunderstanding as to why we're there. People think we're there to glorify war, or we're there to, establish reputations, or sometimes people think we actually bring disasters to the places we're photographing. In '99, I was in Jakarta covering the June elections, and East Timor was just going off. So you had the decision to go there. I sort of got there almost last minute. It was actually on referendum day when everything just went to hell. I was ill prepared. I hadn't done an awful lot of research. It was a trial by fire as to learning who the players were and exactly what was going on. And then every step you took, you were basically either attacked by guys with machetes or guys firing homemade pistols or shotguns or throwing rocks. People would have their children on display that had been killed in a clash, or you'd be going to a funeral, a militia funeral. It's a complicated story because you can never really be sure as to who were the villains and who were the good guys or the bad guys. And my role ultimately is to be bipartisan and just report what I see, but still, you do get caught up in the emotions of these things. So in the end, we were forced to leave. Actually, an Indonesian photographer friend of mine who'd been evacuated by the Indonesian military a few days before gave me his return ticket to Jakarta. When we came back in, you could see the place. It was a different place. It had been looted and torn apart. People had disappeared, and the place was on fire. Departing Indonesian troops took everything they could. What they couldn't take, they destroyed. There'd be grenades going off, windows being blown out as you're walking through the streets, guns going off, people being killed. Then you'd be looking for bodies. You'd see a barking, snarling dog, and they'd be guarding something that you really shouldn't be seeing. My wife, Libby, and I were thinking about having a child. We were working very hard at it. We realised we weren't getting any younger. We were getting to that stage where it was almost too late. And I remember talking to the doctor and saying, look, will you be around so that we could make our child? And I said, I will be there as long as there's nothing dramatic happens in the world. And then the tsunami struck. And I think covering the tsunami is probably the most difficult thing I've ever done. I mean, everywhere you walked was one horror show after another, including, the bodies of children and that shook me. I had a hard time taking photographs even during the event, and let alone coming back trying to get the work published. So then every time I held my child, the first year or so in particular, I just felt this fragile human thing. Some things you're not supposed to see. There's always sticky moments. I mean, fundamentally what your job is to sort of run towards something that other people are running away from. You can't get a strong photograph from a hotel room. You can't photograph it after the event. You've got to be front and centre. Some days you have good days and some days you have bad days. Some days you can do it without thinking, and other days, you're walking back through the shadows. I can't be seen to be passionate fuel because that could get me into trouble. I've got to wear my best poker face depending on where I'm standing or who I'm talking to. I've met some villains that don't see themselves as being villains. They see themselves as being victims. So, it's an odd world, and we're going out there trying to make sense of it. I think the only way we can do that is by going out there with some sort of ethical, moral sense of what's right and what's honest, and tie together some semblance of what is actually truthfully going on there.